Welcome to Hollywood Home. Old Hollywood was filled with charismatic stars who entertained audiences with an array of character archetypes, from the suave and sophisticated to the naive and goofy. In many cases, actors made an art form out of playing characters who seemed dumb or oblivious, using their comedic timing and charm to win hearts. Let's explore the top 10 old Hollywood actors celebrated for these endearing and often hilarious portrayals. Be with me till the end, as today's video is going to more exciting and interesting. Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis was a master of slapstick comedy, known for portraying overly exuberant, socially awkward, and often childlike characters. His characters were typically wide-eyed and overeager, with a habit of creating chaos unintentionally. Despite their apparent simplicity, these roles were filled with depth, as Lewis expertly used body language and facial expressions to maximize the comedic impact. His famous movies were The Nutty Professor, The Bellboy, Cinderfella. His style was defined by exaggerated physicality, from flailing limbs to pratfalls, and vocal quirks that often included squeaky, high-pitched tones. Lewis's characters often embodied innocence but weren't lacking in heart, which made his humor more endearing than purely foolish. He could make the simplest situations escalate into hilarious catastrophes, like transforming a mundane task into a circus of clumsy mishaps. Lou Costello. Lou Costello perfected the role of the lovable simpleton, forming one half of the iconic comedy duo Abbott and Costello. His character often lacked common sense and basic understanding, getting into trouble due to misunderstandings or gullibility. This comically naive personality created a stark and hilarious contrast with Bud Abbott's straight man act, where Abbott's impatience only highlighted Costello's innocence. His famous films were Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Buck Privates, Whodunit. Costello's humor came from a blend of childlike reactions, nervous laughter, and a high-pitched, flustered voice, especially when confronted with something frightening or confusing. In classic routines like Who's on First, his innocent confusion became legendary, showcasing how well he could milk humor from a simple misunderstanding. Harpo Marx. Cracker's Harpo Marx stood out for his silent, clown-like performance style, which played up his character's seemingly dim-witted yet whimsical nature. His comedic approach was a blend of childlike wonder and mischief. Despite his mute act, Harpo conveyed volumes of humor through pantomime, physical antics, and prop gags, often causing delightful chaos. His famous films were Duck Soup, A Night at the Opera, Animal Crackers. Harpo's characters were known for their impish, almost magical quality, often causing trouble without speaking a word. He'd chase girls, blow horns, and use an endless array of tricks. Despite appearing clueless or foolish, Harpo's characters were secretly clever, using their antics to outwit their more sophisticated adversaries, creating humor through physical absurdity. Joe E. Brown. Joe E. Brown's iconic wide grin and energetic antics made him a natural fit for playing over-the-top, dim-witted characters. Brown frequently portrayed enthusiastic but naive men who found themselves in way over their heads, often unwittingly causing comedic mayhem. His exaggerated facial expressions were instrumental in accentuating the humor of every silly or confused reaction. His famous films, Some Like It Hot, Elmer, The Great, A Midsummer Night's Dream. Brown's comedy was amplified by his ability to make even the simplest lines sound outrageous. His characters were cheerfully oblivious, and his physical comedy often involved stumbling, slipping, and wild gesturing. He had a remarkable ability to convey foolishness without malice, making his performances feel innocent and genuine. Red Skelton. Red Skelton's on-screen characters often found themselves in outrageous situations, thanks to their well-meaning but clueless actions. He was a physical comedian who blended buffoonery with warmth, and his characters ranged from bumbling office workers to clumsy service staff. Despite their apparent lack of intelligence, his roles radiated charm and empathy. His famous films were The Fuller Brush Man, The Clown, Whistling in the Dark. Skelton's humor involved a blend of physical slapstick and comedic timing. He could make something as simple as a man slipping on a banana peel seem fresh and uproariously funny. His pantomime skills were legendary, and his innocent expressions made audiences root for his characters even as they blundered from one mess to the next. Stan Laurel. As the dim-witted half of Laurel and Hardy, Stan Laurel became an icon for playing simple-minded, childlike characters who often found themselves puzzled by the simplest problems. His innocent and clueless demeanor was the perfect foil for Oliver Hardy's frustrated straight man act, and together they created a symphony of comedic mishaps. His famous films were Sons of the Desert, Way Out West, The Music Box. Laurel's characters were marked by their blank expressions, soft-spoken mannerisms, and tendency to cry when things went wrong. His signature head-scratching, blank stares, and self-inflicted mishaps, like tying himself in knots, became synonymous with classic comedy. His performances captured the essence of childlike foolishness but were executed with precise timing and nuance. W.C. Fields. W.C. Fields often played grouchy, bumbling, and overly cynical characters who had a skewed understanding of the world around them. While not always the stereotypical dumb character, his roles were usually marked by an amusing lack of awareness or a tendency to devise harebrained schemes. His misadventures often stemmed from a mix of arrogance and misunderstanding, leading to hilariously foolish outcomes. His famous films were It's a Gift, My Little Chickadee, The Bank Dick. Fields' brand of comedy leaned into absurdity, with his deadpan delivery and gruff demeanor providing a contrast to the bizarre predicaments he found himself in. His characters often believed themselves to be clever but inevitably became the butt of the joke due to their miscalculations. Chico Marx. Chico Marx, famous for his thick faux Italian accent and playful personality, often played characters who seemed clueless but were surprisingly shrewd. His portrayals of simple-minded yet crafty schemers fooled both his on-screen co-stars and the audience. He often used verbal misunderstandings and wordplay to comedic effect, adding a unique layer to his seemingly naive persona. Famous films: Duck Soup, A Night at the Opera, Monkey Business. Chico's characters often found humor in mispronunciations and puns, leaning into the comedy of confusion. His piano-playing routines, where he humorously banged on the keys in a seemingly clueless yet skillful way, added to his character's absurd charm. He was a classic trickster in the guise of a fool. Huntz Hall. Huntz Hall became a household name for playing dim-witted, trouble-prone characters in the Bowery Boys films. His roles often revolved around playing the juvenile delinquent or the class clown, full of mischief but lacking in common sense. His big eyes and facial expressions made his cluelessness both believable and hilarious. His famous films were Angels with Dirty Faces, the Bowery Boys series. Hall's humor came from his wild antics and exaggerated reactions, making him the epitome of a lovable dope. His characters often acted impulsively, with little regard for the consequences, which led to a series of humorous escapades that delighted fans. Bob Hope. Bob Hope was a comedic genius whose roles typically featured a blend of cowardice, cluelessness, and self-deprecating humor. His characters were often in over their heads, spouting clever one-liners while trying, and failing, to maintain an air of sophistication. His comedy revolved around being the guy who didn't have it together but desperately wanted people to think he did. Famous films: The Road to series, The Paleface, My Favorite Brunette. Hope's signature style included witty, fast-paced dialogue, often breaking the fourth wall to comment on his predicaments. His clueless personas added a layer of charm to his roles, making his characters relatable and endearing. He specialized in playing men who thought they were clever but were clearly out of their depth. Conclusion: these actors were masters of their craft, bringing depth and humor to characters who appeared naive, clueless, or comically dumb. Their comedic timing and physicality set the standard for generations of comedians to follow.